The grand hall of the alien corporate tower sparkled with silver walls and glowing blue lights. Creatures from distant worlds walked in proud steps. Their clothes made of strange metals and shimmering fabrics. Important deals were being signed. Voices echoed in many languages, and yet no one noticed a man who bent down with a mop in his hand. He was just a janitor, a human father who cleaned floors. His name was Daniel. He worked late nights and early mornings, making sure the shining tiles stayed perfect. The executives passed by him like he was invisible. Some even whispered that humans were weak, only good for cleaning and serving. Daniel never argued. He kept his head down, because he had someone at home waiting for him, his little daughter. Daniel's life was simple. He cleaned, he worked hard, and every coin he earned went to his daughter's food and school. He did not dream of glory. He did not want to stand in the spotlight. But life has a strange way of changing in a single moment. That moment came one late evening. The tower was preparing for a special meeting. Alien leaders had gathered in the highest chamber. They were powerful, tall beings with crystal-like skin and glowing eyes. Their language was sharp, clicking, and full of tones that no machine translator could capture. Daniel pushed his cart into the lower hall, humming softly to himself as he mopped. Suddenly, alarms rang. Guards rushed past him, their heavy boots shaking the floor. Daniel froze. He could hear the loud voices above. They were shouting, angry, confused. An alien representative had stood up in rage, his voice cracking the air. With words no one understood, the other leaders panicked. They tried using their translator devices. But the words were broken, meaningless. The executive in charge slammed the table and demanded someone explain, but none could. The room turned into chaos. The alien kept shouting, his face glowing brighter with every word. Guards pointed weapons. The atmosphere filled with fear if someone did not calm the situation. War could start right there, and then a quiet voice echoed from the corner. "Stop," Daniel said in perfect alien speech. The words rolled out of his mouth, smooth and clear. The exact tones and clicks that only a native speaker could create. The alien froze, his glowing face turned sharply toward the janitor with. The mop silence fell over the entire hall. Guards lowered their weapons in shock. Executives stared in disbelief. Daniel stood there, still holding his mop, his clothes stained with cleaning fluid. But his voice was calm, strong, and fluent in the language no one else could understand. The alien leader blinked, and in that same language, he asked, "Who are you? How do you speak like us?" Every eye turned toward Daniel. Whispers filled the room. Humans were not supposed to know this language. Even the best scholars had failed to master it. Yet here stood a janitor, speaking it like a native. Daniel felt his heart pound. He had kept his secret for years, hiding it from everyone, even his daughter. But now the truth was out. "I learned long ago," he replied in alien tongue. "I listened, I survived. I remembered." The executives leaned closer. One of them whispered in fear, "If a human janitor can speak this language, what else do they hide?" Daniel's hands tightened on the mop handle. He had no desire to be part of their games. He only wanted to finish his work and go home. But he knew nothing would ever be the same again. The alien leader who had been shouting suddenly bowed his head, his anger gone, his voice now respectful. "You, human, you have honored us. You are the first outsider to truly understand." Gasps filled the chamber. Guards exchanged uneasy looks. Some aliens were impressed. Others were threatened. But all were stunned. And Daniel, the single father who only wanted to clean floors quietly, now stood at the center of attention. The fate of humans and aliens shifting because of a secret he never wished to reveal. He looked down at the shining tiles beneath him, his reflection staring back, and whispered softly in his own language, I just wanted to give my daughter a better life. But deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The tower was still buzzing with whispers after the meeting. The name of the janitor, Daniel, spread quickly through the halls. Aliens who had never spoken to him now looked at him with wide eyes. Some with respect, some with suspicion. Daniel finished his shift in silence. Pushing his cart back to the storage room, he felt the weight of every stare on his back when he stepped outside into the cold night air. He looked up at the sky filled with alien ships, glowing like stars. He pulled his coat tighter around him and walked home. The streets were crowded with both humans and aliens. But Daniel's mind was far away. His daughter's smile flashed before him. He promised himself no one would ever take her away. At home, a small apartment waited for him. Old walls, broken lights, but inside was warmth. His little daughter, Emily, ran into his arms, her laughter washing away the fear he carried. "Daddy, you're late again," she said with a playful pout. Daniel hugged her close and kissed her forehead. "I had extra work," he whispered. She showed him the small drawing she had made in school. A picture of the two of them holding hands, standing beneath a sun. Daniel smiled, though his heart ached. He wanted her life to be brighter than his. After putting her to bed, Daniel sat alone by the window. Staring at the city lights, memories he had buried for years began to rise. Long ago, before he became a janitor, before Emily was born, Daniel was a young soldier. Humans and aliens had clashed in violent wars. Earth was fragile, and alliances were thin. Daniel's unit had been sent on a mission to a foreign world, one ruled by the very aliens whose language he had spoken tonight. The mission had gone wrong. His team was ambushed, soldiers died, and Daniel was left behind. He should have perished, but he did not. He survived by hiding among the enemy. 4 months, he lived in their cities, alone, afraid, but also watching, listening. He worked in their markets, pretending to be a simple worker, and every night he memorized their speech, their tones, their songs. He learned how they thought, how they felt. He saw them not as monsters, but as people. One family had shown him unexpected kindness. They gave him food, and in exchange, he helped repair their machines. Their child laughed when Daniel mispronounced words, correcting him, until he spoke fluently. Years passed like shadows. Daniel became more than a survivor. He became fluent, blending in so well that some believed he was one of them, but deep down he always remained human. His heart longing for Earth, for freedom. When the war ended, he found his way back home, scarred but alive. No one asked where he had been, and he did not tell. He carried the secret alone. Now, sitting in the dim light of his apartment, Daniel thought of those days, the alien faces he had known, the voices that had shaped his hidden gift. He had promised never to use it. But fate had dragged him back into the storm. The next morning, news spread across the city. Human speaks alien language. The headlines flashed on every screen. Some called it a miracle. Others called it a threat. At work, Daniel noticed the change. Workers whispered behind their hands. Aliens watched him with narrow eyes. Guards seemed to follow him more closely during lunch break. An executive approached him, tall and sharp-eyed. Her name was Lirana, a high-ranking alien official. She spoke with a voice like steel. "You will meet me after your shift," she said, not as a request, but as a command. Daniel nodded quietly, but his heart sank. He had seen that look before. It was the same look soldiers gave before deciding if a man should live or die. That night, Emily asked, "Daddy, why do people talk about you on the news?" Daniel forced a smile. "Because I said some words," he answered softly. "But don't worry. Nothing will change." Yet he knew everything had already changed. In the shadows of the alien tower, powerful leaders whispered his name. Some saw an opportunity, Others saw a danger. But all agreed on one thing: Daniel was no longer invisible, and as he tucked Emily into bed, he knew his secret past was no longer buried. It had returned, and soon the world would demand answers he never wanted to give. The next day began like any other for the workers of the alien tower. But for Daniel, nothing felt the same when he arrived with his mop and cleaning cart. The halls that once ignored him now seemed filled with eyes. Some alien officials nodded in silent respect, while others whispered sharply. Pointing at him when they thought he wasn't looking, Daniel moved quietly, his footsteps echoing against the shining floors. His only thought was to finish his work and return home to Emily. But deep inside, he knew the peace he once had was already broken. At noon, he was called to the upper chamber, a place where janitors were never allowed. He hesitated, but guards guided him forward, their hands resting on their weapons. Inside the chamber sat several alien executives around a glowing table, their faces unreadable, their crystal eyes reflecting the light in sharp flashes. Among them was Lorana, the official who had ordered him to meet her. Daniel bowed slightly, unsure of what else to do. Sit, Lorana commanded, her voice like a blade. He obeyed, lowering himself into a chair that felt too large for him. The silence stretched until she finally spoke. You shocked many yesterday, she said slowly. You spoke a language that even our best translators cannot understand. Fully tell us, how does a human janitor speak like a native? Daniel's throat tightened, the truth pressed against his lips. But he forced his face to remain calm. I learned long ago. When I was younger, he answered simply, hoping they would not demand more. The aliens exchanged glances, their crystal-like faces glimmering. One of them leaned forward, his voice sharp. Do not insult us with half-truths. Human, a janitor, cannot master what our scholars failed to grasp. Daniel clenched his hands on his knees. He wanted to tell them nothing, to walk away. But he also knew too much silence could make them think he was dangerous. I survived in a place where no one else could, he said finally, his voice low. I listened, I remembered, I endured. Lorana's cold gaze narrowed. So it is true, she whispered. You lived among us during the war. The words cut into Daniel's chest, his past exposed like an open wound. He gave no reply. But his silence was enough. Another executive leaned back, his voice heavy with suspicion. If he survived among us, who did he serve? Did he betray humans? Or was he a spy? The room filled with murmurs. The weight of accusation grew heavier. Daniel raised his head, his eyes steady. I was never a spy, he said firmly. I was only a man who wanted to live. A man who wanted to return home. Some aliens studied him with interest, but others looked unconvinced. Lorana tapped her fingers on the table, the sound sharp in the silence. Your story is dangerous, human. Your knowledge is dangerous. And I must decide if you are to be trusted or destroyed. Daniel's breath caught. Though his face remained calm, he thought of Emily, alone in their small apartment. Her smile, her innocence. She was his reason for everything. He could not let these powerful beings take him away from her. You may decide as you wish, he said, his voice steady, though his heart raced. But understand this, I am no enemy. I am only a father who cleans your floors. Nothing more. The executives whispered again, their voices sharp and secret. Finally, Lorana raised her hand, silencing them. You will continue working here, she said, but we will watch you. Every step, every word, you are no longer invisible. Janitor, remember that. Daniel nodded, though his chest tightened like a cage. He was being given freedom, but it was not real freedom. It was a leash, and he knew it. When he returned to his duties, workers stared openly. Guards followed him at a distance. Whispers floated behind him. That's the human who speaks alien. He must be dangerous. Why is he still alive? Daniel pushed his cart forward, his face calm, but inside, a storm grew. That evening, when he walked home, shadows seemed longer, every step heavier. He unlocked his apartment door and was greeted by Emily's laughter. She ran into his arms, her joy breaking the chains of fear. "Daddy, are you okay?" she asked. Sensing his tiredness, he smiled weakly and kissed her forehead. "I'm fine," he whispered, though his heart was far from fine. As Emily played with her toys, Daniel stood at the window. Looking out at the alien city glowing in the night, he whispered to himself, "They will not leave me alone. They will not leave her alone." And in that moment, Daniel understood something chilling. The real danger was not that they suspected him, but that they might one day try to use him, or worse, use his daughter. And that was something he could never allow. Days passed, but Daniel could not shake the heavy feeling that followed him everywhere. In the tower, guards watched him closely. In the streets, whispers spread like fire. He was no longer invisible. He was no longer just a janitor at home, though life seemed to move in a different rhythm. His daughter Emily brought light to the darkness. She did not care what others whispered. She only cared that her father came home each night, that he smiled at her, that he told her bedtime stories. One evening, after another long day under watchful eyes, Daniel returned to their small apartment. Emily was waiting by the door, her drawing book in her hands. "Daddy," she said, her eyes wide with excitement, "look what I made." She showed him a picture of herself and him standing on a hill surrounded by stars. Beside them were alien shapes, some tall, some strange, but all smiling. Daniel looked at the picture. In silence, his throat tight. "Why did you draw them like this?" he asked gently. "Because you said they are people too," Emily answered simply. "Not all bad, not all scary. Maybe some of them want to be friends." Daniel knelt down, taking her small hands in his voice soft. "You are right, Emily. Some are kind, but some are dangerous. You must always stay safe." She tilted her head, innocent curiosity in her eyes. "Safe from who?" Daniel hesitated. He could not tell her the truth. Not yet, so he smiled weakly. "Safe from anyone who forgets what kindness means." Emily seemed satisfied, and she ran off to prepare her toys, leaving Daniel staring at the drawing. The innocence of her vision touched him deeply. She saw a world where humans and aliens stood together as equals. A world he could barely imagine. Later that night, as Emily slept, Daniel sat by her bedside, watching her chest rise and fall with each breath. Her small hands curled around her toy bear. His heart ached with love and fear. He whispered to himself, "I will protect you, no matter the cost," but outside their walls. The storm grew louder the next morning while Daniel walked Emily to school. He noticed how neighbors stared. One whispered to another, "That's the man who speaks alien." Another muttered, "His child must be strange too." Daniel clenched his fists but kept walking. Emily skipped happily at his side, unaware of the poison in those whispers. When he dropped her off, a teacher pulled him aside, her expression uneasy. "Mr. Daniel," she said softly, "there have been questions. People wonder if it is safe for Emily here. They are afraid." Daniel's jaw tightened, his voice calm but firm. "She is just a child. She has done nothing wrong." The teacher nodded quickly, guilt in her eyes. "I know, but people are afraid of what they don't understand." Daniel walked away in silence, his chest burning. Fear was spreading, and Emily, his innocent daughter, was already paying the price for a secret she did not even know. That evening, when he returned from work, he found Emily waiting by the window. Her eyes wide. "Daddy," she whispered, "why do people say you are different?" Daniel froze, his heart sinking. "Who told you that?" "Some children at school," she said softly. They laughed and said, "My father is not normal." They said, "You are not like other humans." He sat down beside her, pulling her into his arms. "Listen to me, Emily," he said gently. "Being different is not bad. Sometimes it means we can do things others cannot. Sometimes it means we are stronger, and you must never feel ashamed of who you are." "Or of who I am." Emily nodded, though her eyes were filled with confusion. She was too young to understand the weight of his words, but she trusted him completely. Her innocence was her shield that night. Daniel looked out the window again, the alien ships glowing above the city like watchful eyes. He whispered to himself, "They will not touch her. I will never let them touch her." Far away, in the tower, executives met in secret rooms. Speaking his name, planning, some wanted to recruit him, others wanted to remove him. And some whispered of his daughter, wondering if she too might carry secrets, but in the small apartment. Emily slept peacefully, dreaming of stars, her heart pure, her mind free of fear, and Daniel, sitting by her side, knew that the greatest battle was not for himself, but for her innocence, for her future, and he would fight it with every breath he had. The next week began with an unexpected order. Daniel was summoned once again to the highest chamber of the alien tower. The guards who escorted him did not speak, their cold eyes never leaving him. He felt the weight of chains, even though no metal bound his wrists. Inside the chamber, the air was heavy. The executives sat in silence, their crystal eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. At the head of the table was Lorana, her voice sharp as ever. "Human, today we will see the truth," she declared. Daniel stood still, his mop-calloused hands gripping the edge of his shirt. "What truth?" he asked calmly, though his heart beat fast. Another alien executive placed a scroll on the glowing table, its surface old and worn, covered in symbols that shimmered faintly. "This," the alien said, "is an ancient relic of our people. No human has ever read it. No machine has translated it. It speaks of secrets long buried." Daniel stared at the scroll, unease crawling down his spine. "You will read it," Lorana commanded, her voice like iron. "If you truly understand our language, if you truly know our people, then prove it. Translate what no one else can." Daniel's jaw tightened. He understood the trap. If he failed, they would call him a liar, a fraud. Perhaps even execute him. If he succeeded, he would no longer be a janitor. He would become a tool, a weapon. For their cause, his thoughts raced to Emily, to her bright eyes waiting for him at home. He could not afford to fail, but he also feared what success would bring. The scroll was unrolled slowly, the glowing symbols flickering like fire. Daniel leaned closer, his eyes scanning the words. Memories returned, long nights in alien cities. Old songs whispered by the fire. Elders speaking of times before the war. The words were not just language, they were culture, history, pain. Daniel breathed deeply and began to speak. His voice carried the rhythm of the alien tongue, sharp clicks and smooth tones. He spoke of a forgotten journey, of a people who once crossed galaxies seeking a new home, of wars fought not for power, but for survival. The chamber fell silent, every alien listening, every word echoing with truth. When he finished, the room remained still. Not a single voice rose. The silence was heavier than before. Finally, one alien whispered, "He speaks it as though he lived it." Another hissed, "Impossible, no outsider should know this." Lorana's eyes narrowed, her sharp gaze fixed on Daniel. "How much more do you know, human?" she asked, her voice cold. Daniel's mind raced. He had revealed enough, too much perhaps. He lowered his head. "I know enough to understand." Nothing more. He lied softly. The aliens exchanged glances, their whispers sharp, some impressed. Some frightened, one executive slammed his hand against the table. He is dangerous. He must not walk free. But another argued, he is valuable. His knowledge could change everything. We must use him. Daniel stood silently, his face calm, though inside he burned. He was no longer being judged as a janitor, but as something far greater and far more dangerous. Finally, Lorana raised her hand and silenced the chamber. Enough. She said firmly, the human has proven his knowledge. He will live, but he will not live freely. From now on, he belongs to this tower. Daniel felt the words like a knife, belong, as if he were property, as if his life and his daughter's future could be controlled by their will. His heart thundered, but his face remained still. He could not show fear. He could not show anger. Not here, not now. When he was escorted back to his quarters, his thoughts twisted in turmoil. He had passed their test, but the victory felt like a chain tightening around his neck. That evening, when he returned home, Emily ran into his arms. "Daddy, you're late again." She laughed. Daniel hugged her tightly, his chest aching. "Emily," he whispered, "promise me you'll always be brave." She tilted her head, smiling, of course. "Daddy, why?" Daniel forced a smile, brushing her hair gently, "Because sometimes the world tests us, and we must never let it break us." Emily laughed, not understanding, her innocence shining like light. But Daniel's heart grew heavier, for he knew the aliens would not stop here. They had tested him once, and they would test him again, and the next time, the price might be far greater. The tower's walls grew colder with every passing day. Daniel felt the invisible chains tighten around him. Guards followed him, even when he was only carrying his mop. Executives watched him with sharp eyes, and whispers chased him like shadows. But the heaviest weight was not the stares or the whispers. It was the knowledge that Emily was in danger too. If they saw him as valuable, they might see her as leverage, and Daniel could not let that happen. One evening, after a long shift, Daniel was told to remain in the chamber. The others left, and only one executive stayed behind. A tall alien with silver markings on his face, his voice smooth and almost kind. "You are wasted as a janitor," the alien said. Leaning closer, "You have knowledge, you have skill, and you could have power. All we ask is loyalty." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "And what would loyalty cost me?" he asked quietly. The alien smiled faintly. "Nothing. Accept your freedom. You will serve us. You will translate what we command. You will teach what we demand. And in return, your daughter will be safe. She will live in comfort. She will want for nothing, but she will not live with you." The words stabbed like knives. Daniel froze, his chest tight. "You want me to give her up?" he asked in disbelief. "To protect her," the alien said calmly. "She will be raised in safety, cared for better than you ever could. She will grow into greatness, while you, human, will remain useful to us. It is a generous offer. Do not refuse it." Daniel's hands trembled as he gripped the chair, his heart screaming. He thought of Emily's smile, her small hand clutching his, her laughter filling their small apartment. They wanted to take her away. They wanted to make her a prize in their game. "No," Daniel said firmly, his voice shaking but unbroken. "She stays with me." The alien's smile faded. His crystal eyes turned cold. "Do not be foolish, human. We could take her by force. But we are giving you a choice, one that spares her pain." Daniel stood, his jaw tight. "Then, hear my answer. I will never abandon my daughter. Not for power, not for safety, not for anything." The alien's gaze hardened, silence filled the chamber. Finally, he spoke in a low, chilling tone. "You will regret this defiance." When Daniel left the chamber, his legs felt weak, but his heart was strong. He knew the danger was greater now. He knew betrayal waited around every corner. Yet he also knew his choice was the only one he could make. That night, Emily noticed his silence. She tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, why are you sad?" she asked softly. Daniel forced a smile, lifting her into his arms. "I'm not sad, Emily. I'm just tired," he whispered, but she frowned, her small voice carrying truth. "You always say that when something is wrong." He hugged her tighter, whispering into her hair, "No matter what happens, I will never leave you. Do you hear me?" "Never," Emily nodded, trusting him completely. Her innocence, a shield he could not let shatter. The next day, betrayal struck. When Daniel arrived at the tower, the guards did not let him pass. Instead, they dragged him into a hidden chamber. Cold walls surrounded him, and Lorana stood waiting, her expression sharp as a blade. "You refused the offer," she said, her voice flat. "You chose defiance. Now we must decide what to do with you." Daniel glared, his voice steady. "I chose my daughter, that is all." One of the guards sneered. "Then perhaps the child will decide for you." Rage surged through Daniel, his heart pounding. "If you touch her," he growled, his voice low and dangerous, "you will regret it more than you can imagine." For a moment, silence filled the chamber. The aliens studied him, perhaps surprised by the fire in his voice, perhaps amused. Lorana finally raised her hand, and the guards stepped back. "Interesting," she said softly. "Your loyalty is not to us, not to humanity, but to one child. And yet that makes you dangerous, because a father with nothing to lose is a force we cannot control." Daniel's fists clenched, but he remained silent. He knew any wrong word could cost Emily everything. "Leave," Lorana commanded at last. "But know this, human, we do not give choices twice. The next time we demand, it will not be an offer." Daniel left the chamber, his heart heavy but unbroken. He walked through the shining halls with a storm inside him. He had chosen his daughter. He would always choose her, but he knew the cost of defiance was coming, and as he stepped into the cold night air, he whispered to himself, "They think I am their tool, but they will learn soon enough. I am more than a janitor, and I will fight for her with everything I have." The night after his defiance, Daniel barely slept. Every sound outside his apartment made him tense. Every shadow seemed like a threat. He sat near Emily's bed, watching her sleep peacefully, his heart burning with both fear and determination. He knew the aliens would not stop. They had tested him, threatened him, and now they would strike harder. He could not wait for them to come. He had to act first. The next morning, he returned to the tower, but this time, not with the mind of a janitor. He no longer pushed his cart like an invisible man. He walked with purpose, every step firm, every glance sharp. He knew eyes were on him, and he let them see. The executives had gathered once again, their crystal eyes glowing coldly as Daniel was brought before them. Lorana sat at the head of the table, her voice calm but filled with steel. "Human, you defied us, and yet you stand here still. Perhaps you believe you are untouchable." Daniel raised his head, his voice steady. "I am not untouchable, but I am unbroken." A murmur swept through the chamber. Some laughed, others hissed. One alien leaned forward. "You are one man, one human janitor. What makes you think you can resist?" U.S. Daniel's jaw tightened, his hand steady. "Because I am not just a janitor," he said, his voice rising. "I am a father, I am a human, and humans are not as weak as you believe." The words struck the chamber like thunder. Silence fell. The aliens studied him, some with anger, some with curiosity. Lorana narrowed her eyes. "You speak boldly, but words are wind. Show us proof. Prove to us that humans are not weak." Daniel stepped forward, his voice strong. "You wanted me to be your tool, to translate your secrets, to bend to your will, but I will show you something greater. I will show you that humans cannot be owned." He reached for the scroll they had forced him to read before, his fingers brushing the glowing symbols. And then he did something none expected. Instead of speaking the words as they were, he twisted them, he changed them. He spoke in the alien tongue with mastery, but turned the meaning into something new. He spoke of freedom, of courage, of a people who would never bow. KO. He spoke of a father's love that could outshine empires. He spoke of humanity, not as servants, but as equals, as fighters, as survivors. The chamber shook with whispers. The aliens looked at one another in shock, some furious, some unsettled. The scroll was sacred, untouchable, and yet this human had taken its language and bent it to his will. "You dare twist our history," one executive shouted, his crystal skin glowing with rage. Daniel's eyes burned with fire. "I dare because it is true," he said firmly. "You see me as small, but humanity has survived worse. You see me as weak, but I stand here unbroken. You see me as alone, but I carry the strength of every parent who would die for their child. Every human who will fight for freedom." The silence that followed was heavy. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Lorana studied him closely, her sharp eyes narrowing, but for the first time, her voice held a trace of something else. Not anger, not scorn, but respect. "You are dangerous, human," she said softly. "Because you believe, and belief spreads." Another executive slammed the table. "We should end him now." But Lorana raised her hand, silencing the room, her gaze never leaving Daniel. "No," she said slowly. "If we destroy him, his words will grow stronger. His story will spread. Sometimes fear does not break people, it forges them." Daniel stood tall, his heart steady. He had risked everything, and for a moment, he saw doubt in their crystal eyes. Doubt that humans were weak, doubt that humans were lesser. When he was finally dismissed, he walked out of the chamber not as a servant, but as something greater. Whispers followed him, not of mockery, but of awe. That night, back in the small apartment, Emily ran into his arms. "Daddy, you're home," she laughed, her joy lighting the dark. Daniel hugged her tightly. His chest full, he whispered into her hair, "They will never take you from me, Emily, never." And as he held her, he understood the truth. The aliens might have power, they might have ships, they might have empires, but humans had something they could never break: a heart that fights for love, a spirit that refuses to bow, and in that strength, Daniel knew, lay humanity's pride.